This is your urgent call to action. We are all called to lead in a world in chaos, crisis, and turmoil. Join a pivotal global movement for change to transform the leadership crisis worldwide. Will you play it safe, or will you wake up, step up, and speak out? Like Nelson Mandela did for South Africa and the world, we need a radical new way to think, act, and lead, leading boldly into the future. Join host Anne Pratt, a Harvard Fellow and multi-awarded businesswoman, and unlock the best version of yourself to revolutionize leadership with what the world needs now.
Greetings to all you future bold leaders. Thank you for joining us from around the world. My name is Anne Pratt. I'm formerly from South Africa and relocated abroad to attend a Harvard Leadership Fellowship in beautiful Boston in the United States of America. Our bold leader today joins us from the southwestern state of California, just south of San Francisco and north of San Jose. He grew up during an autocratic era in South Korea. After completing high school, his father bought him a plane ticket to relocate to a democratic, free United States of America. As an immigrant at college, he gave away free beer to make friends and to learn to speak English. Since 2001, he has been the Chief Technology Officer and Assistant Dean of Stanford University's School of Education. Apart from advising investment bankers, venture capitalists, and private equity companies operating in the education technology space, he is pioneering an unconventional model for education for the 21st century, taking academic projects from the classroom to the real world and using cutting-edge technology, digital innovations, and education. He is also a qualified airplane pilot. He has worked with multiple international organizations developing mobile technology solutions for education and flying to the most underserved communities and faraway places in Latin America, Africa, and India. Why? Because he believes that every child deserves a chance, and the world is a better world with an education for all. We warmly welcome Dr. Paul Kim, and welcome to Leading Boldly into the Future. Paul, thank you so much for being part of this conversation. Thank you for making the time. I'm so looking forward to it.
Oh, thank you for having me.
You know, I thought it's a wonderful place to begin. You've had a remarkable life of change and transformation. I know you grew up in South Korea, and I was wondering if you could take us back in time in South Korea, share with us how some of those challenges and how you felt at the time.
I was born in 1970, and then I grew up in Korea because I attended elementary school, middle school, and high school. So for 12 years, I attended schools in Korea. So I've seen dramatic changes over that period. When I was born in the 70s, we were under sort of dictatorship form there. And then there were a lot of dissatisfied citizens who wanted a true democratic country. And then while they were struggling, in 1980, there was a military coup again. And so the country wasn't going in the right direction. So I witnessed all the struggles and the political turmoil and the process of making a democratic country. While growing up, we definitely, although I was quite young, I was able to see what was right and what was not right. And then obviously I thought that people should have should be able to express their opinions, and because of the freedom of speech, and that it's in the Constitution. However, people weren't able to speak freely, and especially about the leadership of the country. They often, if you expressed your opinions, you could disappear.
Yeah.
And nobody would know what happened to those people who wanted to express their opinions and the status of the country. So I read newspapers, and I particularly paid attention to what's happening in other countries as well, because I was very much interested in, what is right? Is this the right way of having a life in a country? And so I looked at other countries that they were labeled as the democratic countries. And so, and
Yeah.
then when I was attending middle school and high school, there were a lot of people out in the streets fighting for democracy. And then the government obviously wanted to block that effort. And there were a lot of tear gas going on, and there were a lot of arrests that were made.
What city were you in, Paul?
I grew up in a city called Incheon, which is about 40 minutes drive from Seoul. And Incheon is the major airport city in South Korea. So it was quite active place. And since its proximity to the capital of Korea, it was almost the same as you're living in the metropolitan kind of areas. So there were a lot of activities, and there were a lot of educated people, university students, and people who were labeled as freedom speakers came out on the street to talk about how the human rights were violated. And so I witnessed a lot of activities growing up, and I felt quite disappointed that the level of freedom you can have at that time. I really wanted to see some changes. And obviously, as a student at a middle school, you can't really do much. But I really thought that we need a different kind of experience, and we need a different education, and the government has to be promoting freedom and also the human rights. And then the government should embrace diversity, different opinions. And so I felt that we got to do something, but I will do when the time is right. That's how I felt while growing up.
Can you recall a particular moment or time or an event when it really struck you that, this was a call to action, something for you to not only to want something different, but to act on that and to take a stand? When was that light bulb moment for you?
So I felt that I really need to do something about this country. It was when I was going to school in the middle school age. I was on a bus ride, and then a tear gas bomb came into the bus and exploded, and we were suffocated. And we almost, I don't know if you could die from it or not, but we all, these little young students were all experiencing the excruciating pain because of the bomb that exploded in the bus. And then we all tried to escape, and then there were police out there beating up people, beating to death. And so watching all that, I thought, this is not right. I really need to do something about this country, whatever it takes. And I knew that you cannot change a country by force, because it will lead to another coup or other forms of violence. So I figured maybe education. We all need to be re-educated, and then that way we know how to promote peace, harmony, and true democracy.
But how did you pivot out of that? I mean, you were sitting in middle school. Can you just briefly share with us how you pivoted out of that and what was the big lesson of that moment?
Well, my father used to say that, once you graduate high school, you're all your own. You have to live your life any way you want to live, and you're out of here. So he kept on saying that while growing up, and I thought that maybe I should start early. What about now? What about if I go out and then live my life the way that I need to? And so I talked to my father. Father, can I leave now? I'm a middle school student, but I think I'm ready to leave. And then my father said, where are you going to go? I said,
Yes.
I want to try different places like the
Yeah.
United States, because it's considered to be a democracy is there in practice and preserved. So I want to try that out. And then he said, well, you better graduate high school before you go anywhere.
Yes.
So I had to wait till I graduate high school. And once I graduated high school, I told my father, you promised that I could go anywhere I want in the world. So can I go now? And then he said, okay. So he bought me a ticket, and that led me to come to the US and then start my sort of a second chapter of my life.
Yeah.
Obviously, I felt the sense of freedom when I came to the US, and I knew that I was able to say anything I want. I could talk about the politics, so I could complain about the leadership of the country. That was sort of a real, a true sense of freedom.
Arriving in the United States, I mean, you know, you couldn't speak English. I believe you lived in Georgia, where there weren't a lot of Asians. Can you just take us through what were the big learnings and takeaways about, you know, being an immigrant, arriving in a foreign country, not speaking the language? Share with us how you fast-tracked that process and still held this sense of hope and possibility. How did you do that?
Yes, so I intentionally picked this place in Georgia. It's called Americus, Georgia. It's a lot of people don't know where that is. But I picked that place because there aren't that many Asians. So if you go to a store, everybody looks at you and you're like stranger. And somewhat you could be intimidated by that experience. But for me, I felt like I'm the star. You know, I am a very unique one in this whole community. So it didn't bother me at all. And that's how I started. And then I could not speak any Korean with anybody because there wasn't a Korean when I arrived. So I thought that's good, because that way I can learn English faster. I had to go through the ESL training program to learn English. One thing that I did to make friends very quickly was I put a sign on the dormitory. I said, free beer, room 211. And everybody knocked on my room and say, where's the free beer? And then, oh yeah, here. So I made friends very, very quickly. I became a very famous star in the whole school there as well. There's a cool Asian guy who came in, and then he's got a brilliant idea. He's funny. Be a friend of him. So I made a lot of friends right away, and then that did manage to learn some, not a whole lot, but just good enough to pass the TOEFL test to attend the college courses. So I had to decide, you know, what course would be the easiest for me. And I thought, I love music, so I'm going to take some music class. How about that? So I signed up at a course, which was Music Appreciation 101. And I thought, you know, I can really appreciate music. So I signed up for that course, and then I was shocked that I made a huge mistake, because the professor said that you listen to Beethoven and Mozart and Liszt and all these, you know, musicians, music, and very profound music, by the way. And then you have to write an essay for, you know, 5-page essay. And I thought, oh my gosh, I don't know all the adjectives. How am I going to write a 5-page essay? And I really struggled. And I was able to write one sentence. This music is very good. I like it. And the professor said, what is this? This is not an essay, right? I want 5-page essay. So I told the professor, I really love music. I have a lot of ideas. It's just that it's hard for me to express it in English. And then he said, what language do you speak? I said, I speak Korean. And he said, well, then write it in Korean. Give me a 5-page Korean essay about this music. So back then we didn't have a computer. So I wrote a 5-page essay in Korean, and then the professor said, you have your dictionary, bring it. Took the dictionary, and then he said, well, sit down and then explain to me word by word. So I went through the essay word by word with the Korean English dictionary, and then after explaining the whole essay to him, and he said, well, this is not an English class. This is a music appreciation class. And your expression of this music is spectacular. Therefore, you deserve an A. Wow. So he gave me an A. that was my first A from my very first class in the US. That was inspirational for me. It was
Yes.
highly motivating for me. And I thought, wow, that is a true educator who understands the weaknesses and strengths of a student, and then coach the learner so that the student can really get the best out of him or herself. And so that professor became a role model for me. And I thought, since I got my first A, why don't I really study hard to get straight A's? So I took math classes, and then I started to get A's, and feeling that this is the right thing. This is really the right stuff. When we live a life, that's what we do. We learn and we strive to be the best. And if people around you are helping you get the best out of you, that is the right model for living. And being surrounded by great people and be able to speak freely, and you can complain about the leader, and there's no problem with that. And I think that is a free country, and that is the right environment that everyone should be in and be able to enjoy their life. So,
if we look at the big challenges of this time, and if we look at our future for our next generations, what do you think are the big challenges today?
From my own experience of initiating various education projects in the developing regions, in schools, this is already 2022. So we're well into the 21st century. And yet we have the education model that is borrowed from 19th century. What I would like to share with you is that I'm not satisfied with the education programs, especially in the developing regions. And then I'm not happy about the environment that our learners of the 21st century are.
Are these trends that you see in developed regions as well, or only developing regions?
Well, obviously in the developed regions, there's much better quality of education, although the model itself is still not where it needs to be. But in the developing region, it's much lower quality of education, lower quality of teacher qualifications, and the lack of resources, and those are the serious issues. At the same time, the learning environment the students are in, the culture, the environment, the condition is not ideal in many cases. So what I see is that students are afraid to ask questions. I mean, that's something that I felt when I was in Korea, going grade school for 12 years. Students were afraid to ask questions. And I remember raising my hand, asking a question, and then the teacher said, "That's the dumbest question I ever heard. And then you deserve some spanking." So things like that, so we were very afraid to ask questions. And that is true in many developing regions. The students are not feeling the sense of safety when they are raising their hand and asking questions. That's why I started to initiate various education models that are centered around inquiry-based learning, which is to provide students a safe environment to ask all kinds of questions. Some of them could be hypothetical questions, and I really give a lot of value to hypothetical questions. So I encourage students to ask a lot of critical thinking, hypothetical questions. And as I was doing these projects, and I've done it in many countries in Africa and Latin America and Southeast Asia as well. One day I was in Ethiopia and doing this inquiry-based learning with the students, and then I collected a lot of questions. In the beginning, students ask a lot of simple recall questions because that's what they're used to, because they memorize for the test. But I asked the students, hey, there are different levels of a question quality. Simple recall questions are at the bottom. The hypothetical creative questions are at the top. And so I trained the students to come up with better questions. And then in a 5th grade class, a female student came up with a series of questions, and I looked at the questions that she came up with, and I was very satisfied and inspired by her question. One of her questions was, do we really have constitutional clauses that protect women's rights?
Yeah.
It was in Ethiopia. And I felt very proud that, I need to do more of these sessions with the students so that they can ask more hypothetical questions that can trigger a change, not only in her life, but
Yeah.
in her community and in her country in the future, by having students ask creative, critical thinking, hypothetical questions to better their lives and better their society and beyond. I think that is an important piece that is missed in many of the education programs around the world.
So the question I have, Paul, I mean, to what extent is that relevant to the current environment in places like the US?
Yes.
And if so, and I guess a follow-on question from that is, how important is this kind of thinking for corporates, that are dealing with big issues around how do they transform their workplaces? How do they create a more inclusive environment?
People talk about, the scholars talk about the competencies of the 21st century, and there are many competencies that are missing in the management level, in the leadership level, and then there are 4 C's. I think we hear about 4 C's a lot, right? Collaboration, communication, creativity, critical thinking. These 4 competencies are critical in the 21st century workplace. However, the schools are not promoting those 4 C's. And I like to say that 4 C's are really important, and they are the sort of the important pillars of the competency building in education and training. However, I would like to add 2 more C's. I always emphasize these 2 additional C's, which is compassion and commitment. Because you can get really smart, but if you have no compassion for others, people who are in need of help, then what good is to be smart and be a leader without compassion, without thinking about others who are living in a marginalized communities, who are in dire need of help. So that's why I think that compassion is really important, a key competency for 21st century leaders as well. I talk about 6 C's. And I think that these are the competencies that the leaders in the company must possess, and also the students must be able to understand what these competencies are and learn to practice them.
Are there any other big challenges that stand out for you in terms of, the future of leadership and what is required from the educational sector to help shape and mold and develop the leaders of the future?
Yeah, what we have seen during the pandemic, I think the problem that's been out there has been, it grew drastically, which is the digital access and digital literacy. Those people who have the infrastructure, those communities that have the sound infrastructure for fast access to the internet and connectivity and so forth, the problem hasn't been that dramatic. But in many developing regions where there is a serious lack of communication and technology infrastructure, the school could not operate. They just students stopped learning. Basically. So this learning gap, which is still happening as of today, it's going to have a tremendous impact in the future, and which will directly translate into economic gap. And this bipolarization of the economy and then also the learning will have a serious impact in the future. Countries that are having a pretty good infrastructure, they can continue to educate their kids through the online programs, and they have a fairly good level of digital literacy as well, the teachers and students, etc. But in the developing regions, this whole thing stopped. And this is the 3rd year of the pandemic. And therefore, I think that the leading countries must do something about this developing regions. And because it's going to come back to them as a burden. Political stability of these regions is very important for developed countries to thrive as well. So if we are looking at an opportunity to have a true collaborative community that can help each other and be successful together. Otherwise, this gap will become much more severe, and then it will come back and bite them if you do not act on them. So
yeah. Do you have a practical example you can share with us around a country or a community that was really battling, and just share with us what the situation was in a particular context and how the use of technology and digital literacy and scaling up transformed that community?
When I was working on my doctorate degree in education technology, we're talking about 90s. The internet just came out. The smartphones weren't available. And when people talked about virtual reality, most of people didn't understand what that was. But back then, I thought that the virtual reality would be an important element in the future of education. So back then it was called the VRML, virtual reality markup language. So I used that to construct a virtual hospital with a virtual patient. The whole process, the sequence of making the diagnosis, and also requesting for different images or the tests that are done on the patients were all recorded in the background, so that if anyone is evaluating the student's performance, they would be able to tell whether the student did a good job or not. So I developed that thinking that this will take off very quickly, but back then it just didn't. We were talking about using a modem. I don't know, people these days would understand what modem is, but it was very slow. But I thought that technology will be fast enough, evolve very quickly. But now I think in 2022, we're talking more about metaverse and virtual reality in general. More often than before. So I think the technology is moving, but not as fast as I thought. Mm-hmm. So I visited various locations in Latin America and Africa with the mobile technology before iPhone came out to the market. I thought that if they don't have a school, if they don't have a teacher, I still want to give them something so that they can learn from it. And in fact, that in around 2005, I visited a indigenous community in Mexico. I went there to help build homes for migrant workers. And I was a part of a team. They came down to a corporate farming region, and then they got a job, and then they were working from 4 a.m. till, and then their children were also working in the farm as well, making $2, $3 a day and so forth. So when I was there building houses, and I thought, no, how come the kids are not going to school? There's got to be a school for them. So I asked them, and they said, there's no school for these kids, and there is no school in the whole area. I said, well, that's not right, because I believe education is a human right. Mm-hmm. And the kids were not getting access to education at all. So I said, I got to do something about it. I was very lucky enough to get hold of small mobile devices that used to be used in museums. When you walk in the museum space, when you take a picture of a barcode, it explains to you what that piece of art is. Yeah. And there was a company that was going out of business and left with a whole bunch of these devices. So I said, can I take them all? Yeah. So I took a lot of those devices and I reprogrammed it, and I put storytelling books there. I put sing-along songs, dictionaries, and mobile games, etc. I put those things, and then I went back to that place where I used to build houses for the migrant workers. And then I gathered the children there, and I said, I heard that you guys are smartest kids in the whole region, so that's why I came here. I came from a very far place. I came here to get your help. Well, I got these strange objects. I don't know what these are. Yeah. Can you investigate and tell me what you find? So I just patiently watched. Yeah. One of the girls there accidentally pressed the power button and pressed it for 3 seconds. And then it turned on, and it started to make noise. It started to show things. And all the kids around her came to her and asked her, what did you do? And then she said, I just pressed this thing, and then this happened. So everybody was able to turn on the device, although there were a few broken ones too, but they were all able to turn on the devices and started to share. So they were teaching each other. So about 40 minutes later, they said, Well, sir, we think we got it. We found what we were investigating. So I said, well, really, can you explain to me what you found? And they said, well, in order to make noise, you need to do this, turn it on, and then you browse through different buttons, and then they were explaining to me what kind of contents were there, how to play music, how to play stories, and go to dictionary and so forth. So the most important thing about this is that I did not want to teach them, because if I start to teach something, they will become passive learners. And then there wouldn't be any opportunity for discovery learning, wouldn't be any opportunity for experimental learning. There wouldn't be any opportunity for any autonomous learning. And that's how they learned. And so I named this pedagogy, alien pedagogy, because I'm a foreigner who came from far place, and then just gave them the devices and gave them the setting for the exploratory learning to take place. So the kids were really brilliant. And after a few days, they said, we read all the stories, and we listened to all the sing-along songs, and we studied them all. Do you have more contents? So, well, I'll be back with more contents. And that was the beginning of my mobile learning journey back then. And then I expanded to many more countries, and I added many more education contents on these mobile devices. So to me, every child around the world is a great engineer, great scientist, great artist, great educator. It's just that they don't get a chance.
Yeah.
If a child gets a chance, he or she could become an amazing person. And I truly believe in it. I think every child is born with a tremendous gift that's unrealized if they're living in places where there's no opportunity. So that's why I would love to give children around the world at least once the opportunity to find about themselves, find about their gifts, talents, and realize them and develop them and use them to be committed, to compassionate about others, and make this place a better place. Wow. And I got myself a pilot license so that I could go to these places more frequently and convenient. And so last year I began that journey with the other pilot friends. So we need to take a turn. So I, with my pilot friends, we flew down to a remote place that was for the indigenous community. And so we started the education projects through that experience. So what I'm doing and what's so exciting for me is that I could fly to these remote areas where the indigenous community children are living, and I can expand these projects. So I love this journey, which is, I think it's a chapter 3 of my life. So this is something that I will do for the rest of my life.
It sounds like a very exciting chapter, Paul. What do you feel about the broader educational system in terms of how we are developing? And I know a lot of your work has happened at the child level, but if we think about not only children, but in terms of developing young adults and even older adults, how do we need to re-educate ourselves?
Yes, what's sad about these young adults that I see around me, and especially in the developed countries as well, because of this bipolarization of wealth, which is becoming severe. Young people give up very easily. And then I've seen that. And then South Korea, I don't know if you know that, but the suicide rate is very high.
Yeah.
They tried something and it didn't work, and they ended up with a whole lot of debt, and they commit suicide. And that's really sad in a developed country setting. So I published a book called Relearn. And it's a book that I published to help these young people to rethink about their life, reevaluate their talents and gifts that they may have not discovered yet. And so I say relearn, because relearn is very different from learn. And the reason that I say is in order to relearn, you have to get rid of your previous learning in a way. You have to get rid of biases and also stereotyping, all the prejudice. You have to get rid of them to start new. And that's why relearning is a little more challenging, but it's rewarding. We know that in our generation, we're going to live quite long compared to our previous generations. I think the life expectancy has increased tremendously. So if you are age 20, you think that you have grown up, but you haven't even started yet.
Yeah.
Even if you are 30 and 40, you still haven't really started, because the amount of life you will have, it's much, much more than your previous generations. You want to spend the rest of your life learning and relearning, discovering your undiscovered talents and gifts, and connecting newer dots and creating opportunities for yourself and others as well. So I think that it is important for young people to rethink about what does it mean to relearn and reset and be able to connect newer dots with undiscovered competencies and talents. So I encourage people to do that. And that's something that I enjoy doing when I speak with young adults. I always like to coach them, just like the coach who started my college life in the Music Appreciation 101 class.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how statistics tell you that it's impossible.
Yeah.
If your attitude is right, then you will win over statistics.
Yeah.
So my coaching technique and the big message out of that to young students is that even if you were born poor, it doesn't matter. Whatever the statistics say, if your attitude is right, attitude will always win over statistics. That's number one lesson that I like to give to young people. So don't complain about your external elements, poor family you were in, or how uneducated you may be now. But if you educate yourself, if you can train, whatever the statistics say, you will win over it. If you don't know where you are, you don't know where you're going, as a pilot, there are a few things you need to do. If you get lost while you're flying, climb. You have to go higher altitude because you may be hitting something if you get lost. So go high. Yeah. Climb and circle. You have to circle and see where you are. Try to identify where you are. And you have to conserve. You have to conserve resources, right? And you have to communicate. You have to talk to ATCs, the air traffic controllers. Try to find other pilots around you in the air and confess. Tell them the truth, where you really are, as much as you know, and what you really need. This is what you need to do as a pilot. And I think this applies to everybody. If you are not sure where you are, if you feel you're lost, don't dwell in your place. Climb up. Sure. Get to a higher altitude so that you can look around and see who could be helpful to you. Yeah. Talk to people as much as you can. Talk to people and confess. Tell the truth. What help you really, really need. Yeah. And there will be out there people who are waiting to help you. Talk to as many people as possible, because if one person out of 10 can give you the true, opportunity and help, you will really get out of that situation that you may be in. So that's lesson number 2. Yeah. Lesson number 3. Yes. It's about where are you? Are you in the wrong place? This is a question you may want to ask. It is similar to number 2, but this is a little different. Yeah. Are you in the wrong place? This question is, imagine, let's say you know a little bit about programming, and then you try to get a job in Silicon Valley, which is very difficult. Just by knowing a little bit about programming, you are not going to get a job at Google or Facebook or Apple. But imagine if you are in Congo working for an NGO that teaches children coding, your programming skill probably the highest in the whole region in that area. So you make sure whatever skill set you may have, you may think that this is a little, so tiny, insignificant, but you may want to think again, because your talent and your skill that you may have could be tremendous talent and skill in a different place around the world. So don't limit yourself into just the one place. I know that you may want to get a job at Facebook, Apple, Google, or big corporation making 7 figures.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that is the true meaning of life. I don't know if that is a value of a real joyful life, right? I mean, if you have to seek money, and if that is the only thing that you want to seek, then you may have to stay wherever you are and try to make a difference there. But whatever skill set, although it may not be perfect, although it may not be so great, but that could be regarded as a huge talent and skill set in someplace else around the world. So whatever that may be, the skill set you may be, rethink about repositioning yourself.
Yeah.
So I see that people who are struggling here could be thriving in a different place. So always ask yourself, are you in the wrong place?
Sure.
And try to answer that. So that's a number 3.
Mm-hmm.
Number 4, do you have the integrity needed to live a true joyful life? What I mean by that is the integrity is something that I've been thinking about a lot, and I always question myself, do I have that integrity? Do I express that? Do I reflect that? One time I went to an airport to take a flight, and there was a gentleman. His name is Quincy Carr, but he was on a wheelchair. And when I was approaching my aircraft, he asked me, "Hey, sir, can you help me?" I said, "Oh, what can I do for you?" And he was on a wheelchair. He said, "Can you get me on that plane?" So he was pointing to an airplane. So, oh, really? Okay, why not? So I lift him up and put him in the aircraft. And I thought maybe he want to take a picture. You know? However, a few minutes later, he took the plane and he flew away with a very professional level of a radio. Because as a pilot, you have to do a real good job on radio as well, communicating with the ground power and airspace controller and so forth.
Yeah.
He sounded like a real pro. And I thought, you know, what did I do wrong here? Because in my earlier sort of a stereotyping, I thought that he was just going to take a picture, but I was totally wrong. And it happens a lot in our life when you look at something and then you think that you know something. I didn't think that he would be a pilot because he was on a wheelchair, because he could not walk.
Oh, got it.
If you cannot use your legs and foot, you cannot control the airplane because the rudder, the brakes, and you have to.
So he was the pilot on the plane, and you
He was a pilot, and I did not think that he was.
Yeah.
So that bias.
Yeah.
And so that was the issue, and then that's why I started to think, you know, the integrity of a person. You know, and what is
and what is your definition of integrity, Paul? How do you define that?
Someone who does not judge based on the look, and then you know, don't judge by its cover, right? Sure. And someone who doesn't have the biases, and stereotyping, prejudice, things like that. So I think that's what that triggered me to rethink about my own integrity. And later I found out about him, and then in fact he was a very famous gentleman who is a flight instructor. He was not just a pilot; he teaches other kids to become a pilot. And in fact, he has his own NGO teaching kids from marginalized communities to become a pilot. And in fact, that the unfortunate thing happened to him was when he was when he was in 20s, he used to do marketing and advertisement for a furniture company on a street corner. You see, he was turning the big sign at a corner, advertising for a furniture store. And that's how he was making money. And he was on a track to become an airliner, a pilot. Unfortunately, when he went to a barbershop, he got shot 5 times on his spine, and he almost died. But after surgery, unfortunately, he became paralyzed. So he could not walk by himself from that point on. But he did not give up.
That's fantastic. So that's the fourth takeaway.
Yes.
So in is that it in terms of the book? I mean, would you say those are the main takeaways in terms of re-educating oneself and rethinking?
Oh, there are many more. I asked 27 questions in that book. So these 4 are out of 27 questions that I asked.
So those are top of mind. But that's a powerful formula, and is food for thought. Moving slightly to going back to your own journey again, Paul, I know you came to the United States in 1990. And if we think about not giving up, I know we share an admiration for a remarkable leader of the 20th century. And, 1990 was the year Nelson Mandela was released from prison. And I was wondering if you could share with us your Mandela moment. I know you heard more about him when you came to the US, but could you take us back in time to your Mandela moment? Where were you? What did you learn? What did you hear? And how and why has Mandela inspired you?
Yeah, I learned about Nelson Mandela when I came to the US, and he reminded me of politician in South Korea. He was one of the activists back then fighting against the leadership dictators back then. And he was not only imprisoned, he was kidnapped. There was an assassination attempt and many, many ordeals. And so Nelson Mandela reminded me of him. And he became a president too, Kim Dae-jung.
Yes.
So he's a very well-regarded and loved politician. He passed away, so I think that his legacy is well remembered in South Korean history. So Nelson Mandela, just reading about him and learning about him, what we learn from him is that his perseverance and his will to fight against all the human rights violations and becoming the leader of the country eventually. That's so inspiring. And that's something that we need to share with as many young people as possible, because people easily give up. The young people, especially these days, they even commit a suicide because they failed a few times. And I think that what Nelson Mandela has brought to us is that the importance of freedom and that importance of promoting and protecting human rights. And inclusiveness in political activities and protecting people with the differences. And I think those are the really educational contents for the 21st century. That's why I think that people call him father of the nation, right? Absolutely. And so his global legacy is out there, and then that's why he earned the Nobel Peace Prize as well. So I would love to share his story much more through my own education projects, and I like to give his books to many children around the world so that they can regard him as their role model. Because in many countries, some countries don't have role models. All they have is the dictators and military generals who are initiating coups and things like that. So I think that peace by peace, meaning, you do not achieve peace by violence, but you achieve peace by peaceful movement. And I think that Nelson Mandela is a great example of that. So
Yes.
would love to share his legacy and
Well,
lessons.
I'm super excited, Paul, about us engaging in more of those initiatives together. And it's remarkable just connecting some of the dots, not only, in terms of Mandela's life and legacy, but also with some of your own South Korean role models, but I think it's very interesting what you say in terms of the importance of having those role models for our youth, empowering them, educating them, and sharing those examples of possibility and hope. So, super excited to be continuing this conversation and working together on more of these initiatives. When you first came to the United States, can you just briefly share with us what is one of your favorite discoveries in the US, around food, culture, entertainment? Can you share one of your fun discoveries?
Yeah, when I first came to the US, I did not know the difference between the South and the rest. And so I obviously picked up the Southern accent, and which I could still practice. If I call someone, my friend living in the South, my accent changes right away.
Yeah.
The food they were eating, and then I really enjoyed. And then also the in the cultural aspect, the line dancing. I don't know if you're familiar with the line dancing in the South.
Yes.
That's a remarkable performance, and I really enjoyed learning and participating in line dancing in the South. So
yes.
I don't know if you've done it or not.
I have actually. I have.
Oh, you have?
I have. It's great fun, and that's so interesting, and it's very, it's just very inclusive. It's a lot of fun. It's and good exercise at the same time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Very, very unique to the South.
Yes. And what has been one of your favorite meals that you've discovered in the US?
Oh, I like all of them. I like all of them. Grits. It is so Southern. And then if you love grits, you can survive in the South.
Okay. Okay. That's wonderful. And what do you think, can you share one thing you think your father would share with the world about you, Paul, in terms of your incredible positive mindset? What would he say about you as a child that kind of spoke to the fact that you would come to this country, not know the language, choose a place where you don't have fellow Koreans to speak to? What is one thing your father would share with us about something he spotted in you as a child that revealed this incredible mindset and attitude?
Well, he often said at the dinner table that nobody helps you. You got to do it yourself. You got to figure it out. And then that's the plan A and plan B. You got to be yourself. That taught me to be autonomous, independent, self-regulated learner. And then he always emphasized the importance of learning. Although I still have funny pronunciation and accent, and as I said, I don't know all the adjectives of the world phenomenon, but I'm still struggling, but I'm still learning. As I'm learning, I feel I'm live. If I don't learn, I know that that's the day that I'm not living. So as long as I'm living, I'm sure I'll be learning, and I enjoy learning, and that gives me the sense of life. So I think all these are from the lessons that my father shared over at the dinner table. So I really appreciate him, although he's watching over from the heaven, but I'm sure that he must be proud of what I have done, at least some of it.
I have no doubt. And what's one thing your mother would say, Paul?
My mother would say that you look like your father.
Really? Okay. Yeah. Just just in our final moments, are there any final thoughts you'd like to share with us around the future of leadership and what is the world calling us out to be and do today? Any final thoughts around leadership, education, or even final thoughts around Mandela's message to the world?
Yeah, I always like to re-emphasize the important two C's: compassion and commitment. Being educated, being smart, being intelligent don't mean anything unless you're compassionate, unless you understand the needs of others and you feel for it. If you don't feel for it, it's not real. And if you feel for it, you can be committed to make a difference, not only in yourself, but in the people you are helping and the people who are in dire need of help. If there are suffering and if there is a pain, you got to share that pain, and that's how you truly understand them and come up with solutions for them. So what's the purpose of education? What's the purpose of innovation? It's to be compassionate and commitment, oriented, so that you are committed to make a difference. And that's what I like to share with the young people who are living in the 21st century. Think for others and promote peace and prosperity for all.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Paul Kim, what a great honor and what a great privilege. You truly are a champion of change. I'm super excited about the initiatives that we're going to be working on together. I hope you'll come back again and share some more of your amazing insights and stories and lessons from around the world. But thank you for your remarkable life, and thank you for today.
Thank you for having me, and I'm looking forward to many, many collaboration opportunities in the future.
Speaking to Paul Kim at times took me back to a dark past of apartheid South Africa. Children were shot and killed for peaceful protesting. Voices went silent in the privacy of a jail cell. And people went missing without a note or a forwarding address. It is hard to explain the immense risk, losses, and pain for everyone that will come if losing a democracy, especially when that is all that people have known. Coming from an autocratic country, I personally know that democracy can never be assured. It can never be taken for granted. It is fragile, and yes, it is a team sport. We all can and must show up and step up and make our voice count. Paul's passion and innovation around education reminds me of a famous Nelson Mandela quote. He said, "Education is the most powerful weapon that you can use to change the world." Paul's remarkable work shows us what is possible. In fact, I have no doubt that Mandela is proud of him and smiling from above. We can and must take education from the classroom to the people. We can and must give every child a chance. Why? Because when all students learn, nations prosper. Look at Finland or Singapore or even South Korea. An educated population, an educated world means a greater world of stability, of peace, and economic prosperity for all. So until next time, remember that leading boldly is about making thoughtful, clear choices. And bold leadership is about taking bold action, just one small step at a time. One step for you, but together, one giant step for humanity. So until next time, take care and take thoughtful, bold action.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Leading Boldly into the Future. Please find links and connections mentioned in this show in our blog and never miss an episode by subscribing at anne-pratt.com. That's ANNE-PRATT.com. May these insights from inspiring industry leaders, remarkable disruptors, and courageous champions of change bring forth a brand new you, emboldened, empowered, and ready to inspire hope. Come back soon Share with your friends. Sign up on anne-pratt.com and join our movement for change. Why? Because the world needs you to lead boldly too.